Hello, and thanks for stopping by as I play through Victory Games Pacific War. What I have in front of me right now is the base Vassal engine. I'm using the latest release, 217, yes. And I have two Vassal modules for Pacific War loaded right now. The latest one, as the time of this video, is 1.64. A lot of good aesthetic improvements in 1.64 to the counters. But I'm started the game with 1.62 because 1.62 is the last module that was released that actually allows you to start a new game using the scenarios in the scenario booklet of the game. So what I did was started with 1.62, did the setup, saved that, and then opened it in 1.64 and went from there. And that's what we have here. I did some pre-video stuff up here, but I've decided to play Campaign Scenario 3, Southern Conquests. This starts at the beginning of the war, December 1941. Technically, Japan and the Allies aren't at war at this point, and this is the starting locations that I have that I set up. Now, when you first start the scenario, you'll find that there are some air units and some land units for each side that have to be placed, and you get some flexibility where you place those. And so I went ahead and did that, and I'll briefly go through the setup that I have and my intent for the rules that I'm going to use for playing this game. It is solitaire. I'm playing in the role of the referee, so I have access to both the Japanese and the Allied sides. And I'm going to try to play through and not make too many tactical mistakes or rules mistakes. I do welcome any comments in the comment section below this video. This is the first video in this channel where I want to play through some of my favorite war games, probably mostly on the Vassal engine on my computer, just for space reasons, limitations in where I am. But I may occasionally just film a paper and cardboard map game out on the table. We'll see in the future. Okay, I'm assuming also that for Pacific War, the people who are tuning into this are familiar with it. Might have even played it and are familiar with how the rules work in this. I don't plan on spending tons of time going through the intricacies of each rule, but this is more of how I saw the strategy and how I implemented the rules and the strategy to play this game. Okay, say up front, I do like the house rules that I found online and some of the Con Sim World and Board Game Geek. And the pack of house rules that I've decided to use are titled Improving Pacific War, and this is by an Australian gentleman by the name of Marcus Stumpner. Marcus has done a lot to help answer rule questions if the game designer Mark Herman himself wasn't available. Marcus was also picked by Mark Herman to help in the redesign of Pacific War, which should be coming out. It's been announced for a while now, as of spring 2018. It's still in the works with some final rules and scenario work to be done. But as of the Mark Herman designs, and he's one of the preeminent wargame designers, this is my favorite. He has one, the Empire of the Sun, which is an extremely popular game and is much more recent than this. This Pacific War was released 1985. Empire of the Sun deals with the same subject matter, the Pacific theater in World War II, and is very popular for its card-driven system. The Pacific War, this older game, is much more nuts and bolts, much more into the detail of planning each operation, making hard choices, and all this you'll see as I play through this game. I do not have Empire of the Sun. As I said, I haven't played it. But for me, Pacific War just hits the right spot for a strategic to operational level. And what I mean by strategic being the grand scheme, the scale of the game. Once you get to the whole war, making choices about where you're going to attack, where you're going to accept risk, and give minimal attention to what your overall objectives are. You have free reign in this game. Now, as the Japanese, you obviously want to follow some historical events, because you have to take resource-rich areas in the Dutch East Indies. You have to control your lines of communication by taking the Philippines and controlling the Philippine Sea, South China Sea, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of variability in there, though, which I really like about this game, and I like how it deals with each of those campaigns. China's in this game, India, Australia. It's very large in scope, but you can get down to individual naval battles in a relatively short amount of time if that's what you want to do as well. Okay, so without rambling on too long about all that, I will be using the house rules, which have made a few important changes, mostly dealing with ground unit movement, submarine combat somewhat, the arrangement of task forces, and you know, to align them more with historic reality. And in the back of the document, it's about 10 pages long. There's some Chrome rules at all, which I like, that I've played using against opponents online, and they seem to work pretty well. I'll use those. I don't claim to be a master at this game. I don't claim to have all the answers to strategy, and I will invariably make strategic mistakes, and I might rule mistakes, and I'll forget something, and so I welcome any comments. Just keep it civil, please. And I'll discuss why I did something, or you can point out why I should have done something else, and I'll agree with you and say, yeah, you're right, I really screwed that one up. But it's a very broad game. It's a very deep game as well, and very few people would claim to be an expert in this game and have seen it all. Even to this day, you know, 35 years later, we're still getting questions on the forums about this game and rule clarifications that come up, and the people who know most about this game still say, you know, we haven't really seen that situation before. I'm not sure. So I really like that very much. So campaign scenario 3, Southern Conquests, starts at the beginning of the war. The Japanese strike. It doesn't specify in the actual scenario for the campaign, or for number 3, that the Japanese have surprise attack, but interestingly it does in the if you play the strategic scenario, which is the whole war. It does specify the Japanese have surprise attack, and that, I think I like the idea of doing this historically, so I gave the Japanese his surprise attack in this. So what that is going to allow them to do is move what is called, through contact movement, get to their, or at least very close to their objectives before the Allies have any chance of responding to that. In fact, under surprise attack, the Allies will not be able to, they can activate units, but they will not be able to move them initially. And I'll show you how the sequence of play goes. So again, the victory conditions for this is the Japanese have to control the Philippines, and by control, it's all the land hexes of the Philippines. It says this hex 3620, which is here. All hexes within 4 hexes of this here is considered the Philippines. So this is all the land hexes of the Philippines. They must control the hex that is Manila, and only one Allied unit can be allowed to be in any of those hexes, and it can't be Manila. Basically the same for Malaya. You have to control Singapore and all the contiguous land hexes 4 hexes away from Manila, or excuse me, from this location here, Singapore. You have to control Sumatra. There can be no Allied units in Sumatra. You have to control specific locations where there are these red circles are resource points locations. You have to control Java, all the hexes of Java. You have to control even out here in Timor, and so on. Borneo. It specifically lists a couple dozen locations that you have to have, as well as saying all of the Philippines. So they have a lot of work to do, and they have 3 months to do that. They start with 115 points to activate units with on the first month. They always have more points than the Allies, but interestingly in this game, the Allies will have, I believe it is 48 points to start. In the following 2 months, they will have 60 points per month, which is a fair number of points for a relatively small theater. I've played this game, I've played this strategic scenario where I've had less points than 60 and had to, fight in Burma and China and other places, fund the Central Pacific headquarters, the South Pacific, so on. So the Allies will never have more than the Japanese or more capability, but they do have a lot. And the Japanese have quite a tight timeline in order to make all their victory locations. So a savvy Allied player should look for opportunities to derail the timeline and just outlast and delay to where the Japanese eventually just can't win. Okay, so set to begin here. Going to bring in the Japanese display sheet, one of the largest player aids in the game. The Allies have one too. These are specific to the side you're playing, so the Japanese one is not the same as the Allied one in many different areas of the charts. But we'll be using right here where my mouse is, we'll be using the player phase track here. So we'll be starting at the weather phase, and it shows which phases are omitted for which level of scenario you're playing. We're playing the campaign scenarios, which is the second from the top. In the strategic game, you use all the phases. So I won't be advancing the marker on that display, just because the Vassal engine, this module, gives you little other ways to do that, and I'm using these little devices up here. The first one is for the strategic sequence, which gets you up to the battle cycles, and then when we get to the battle cycles, I can demonstrate that, which is this tinted area. The strategic sequence gets you up to what is the battle cycle, and then after you get to the end of the battle cycle, you repeat and go back to the battle cycle. These phases up here in white are only played at the beginning of each month, or at the beginning of each month. Okay, so weather. In the weather phase, you cross-reference the zone. You roll for each of the 4 zones: South Pacific, North Pacific, Asia mainland, and Southeast Asia. You cross-reference a die roll with the time of year it is. So we are in December, and that gives you the prevailing weather conditions for that region of the map for that month. So I've pre-recorded this turn, and I'll be just clicking through and making comments and explaining what I'm doing and why I'm doing what you see here. So I made a roll for the North Pacific. Rolled a 6. North Pacific is pink. So in December, a 6 will give you squall conditions, and there'll be some optional rules that I'm using for the effects of squall or weather in searches. And fog and rain and monsoon affect air missions. Squall, it does not. So I use a weather marker, and I just try to align it as best I can on this little area here under squall in the pink area. Now, interestingly, they designed this map, the hexagon structure of it continues even when you don't see them, so you have to put each marker where a hex would go. So they don't fit exactly correctly. South Pacific rolls an 8. And interestingly, that also gives us a squall in the South Pacific. For Asia mainland, anything 0 to 9 is automatically clear, so Asia mainland is clear. And Southeast Asia roll is an 8, which is also a squall. You can see that here. If I don't cover it up, December to February, Asia, Southeast Asia is squall. So, okay, the next phase that you do, and you advance phases by clicking plus on these devices up here. But since this is pre-recorded, I'm just clicking the arrow button, which plays through the turn that I've already done. Next phase is strategic intelligence. Strategic intelligence is done by rolling a die on your display. As described earlier, I believe I did, some rolls in the game have to be done secretly so your opponent doesn't see what you're actually rolling. And rolling strategic intel, rolling operational intel are 2 examples of that, and there are devices here in this display in order to accomplish that. I'm not going to push this button because I've already rolled it as part of the game that I'm now clicking through. But you will get a number here, which will then cause you to put a marker on a different track. Higher number, you have a possibility of 1 through 3 if you're the Japanese, or strategic levels of intelligence 1 through 4 if you're the Allies. The higher numbers are better, and that affects your ability to respond to the enemy, and also affects how likely you are to be surprised or to surprise the enemy in each operation through the device of the operational intelligence rolls. And I'm assuming you know, the viewers here will know a little bit about this game and how that mechanism works. So I can bring this in to show you. Japanese hit this button, rolled an 8. Cross-referencing December 1941, and 8 gives them a green result, which is a level 3. They get level 3 strategic intelligence. And here's a good place to show you how you can speed up your games a little bit. What I had neglected to do prior to starting when I played this was put all the extra little markers on the cards that I will need. I don't have my actual level 1, 2, and 3 strategic intelligence markers on the display yet. I didn't have the operational intelligence markers on the display yet. I didn't have the markers that go on the operational display, which is this. So the next several clicks will be me going through and putting the needed level or markers on these cards. So the Allies roll their strategic intelligence as well. Their roll was a 6, and again I want to stress that if you're playing against an opponent, this must be kept secret. But I'm playing solitaire and sharing the insights of the game with the viewers here, so I'm letting everybody see what's going on. A 6 in December is also for the Allies, a level 3. So what you do with that is you find your strategic intelligence level 3 markers, which you keep off in private on your card, your display sheet, and you secretly place the level that you have on this spot here. And these are revealed at the end of the month, so the opponent can see what level of strategic intelligence you were operating with for that month. Okay, the turn clicker clicks you through several phases that you will not need if you're playing, unless you're playing the full strategic scenario game. Okay, according to scenario rules, the Japanese start with 115 points, and they only have 1 headquarters. So that is the south marker for the south headquarters. So I used a 100. I used 2 markers actually to denote 100, and I put it on 11, but it's supposed to be on 15. That over there. This is how I divided the points, 48 points for the Allies. I used 20 points for the Southwest Pacific. I'm going to give priority of points and effort right now to Doug MacArthur in the Philippines to try to not get steamrolled too quickly. So he gets 20. Malaya, because they have the 2 capital ships, they have some air units, might be able to consolidate, move some of their land units back towards Singapore in order to hold out longer. I gave them 15, and woe be it to the Dutch, they only get 13. Do the best they can. Okay, starting The game, nothing should be isolated. Later on we might see the effects of isolation, but should be nothing at this stage. Okay, strategic transport. Try to demonstrate that as well. The quick way to find your cards that you want is to click those little buttons up there. Okay. The Japanese start with a bunch of long-range air, that's what LRA stands for, stacked in a certain hex, which was down here, 4322. I decided to move one by strategic transport to 4212, which brings it up here, and that's to give me better searches in the South China Sea here. And the way you do that, I mean, it's extremely easy. Whatever force this is down here, 16, you just take the air unit or the land unit, whatever you're doing, and moving it to the force that it goes to, which is force 21, to here. There's rules for how much you can move. You can move land units and air units. You do not move ships via strategic transport unless they're crippled. So just as you're playing your game, go through those rules carefully to make sure that you're not messing up. I'm not moving any ally units at the start of the month in this phase because we're not at war. They're not expecting anything. And I had placed things relatively where I thought they would be useful at the start of the game anyway. Start of the game, no reinforcements, no naval repair, no replacements, no engineering needed. Okay, the Japanese are automatically, as it says here, the operational player by scenario rule, so no need to do anything here. What you would normally do is both sides would bid a certain number of command points. Another point I really like about this game is that you really do have to plan ahead. You have to think about what you're going to do, how much force you need to bring to the operation, and that's air power, sea power, submarines, and land combat units. You have to then budget, given a finite number of command points, how long you think that operation is going to take, and you have to also allow for your units to be back at a safe deactivation location. That's usually a port for a naval unit or an anchorage. So you almost never will have too many points or too much time. So you always make hard choices about what you're going to get the most use out of and which units you absolutely need. Me personally, I like battleships, but I hardly ever use them just because they're very expensive, and I can try to economize on the number of points I have by not using them. Okay, so here I stopped. I'm going to continue. That was December 41-1. I'll go to 2. What am I doing here? You want to load continuation. That's what you want to do. And because there was a mismatch from which version of the module was used to this one, it just always asks you, are you sure you want to do that? I haven't noticed any problems using a newer module to go through older module files. So the Japanese I activated for a 2-week operation. If you've read the rules through, you understand that that is paying the actual activation point cost that you see on the piece. The submarines are showing that they cost 1 point, and they are activated for an entire month. That's probably a poor example because submarines are special. They don't get activated for numbers of weeks, they get activated for a full 30-day month. But each of these units has this little red marker, or this white if it's an airplane, and that's how much it costs to activate them for a 2-week, 14-day operation. Once you activate for longer than that, you pay substantially higher costs for that. So I activated for a 14-day operation. That's spending 104 points, which makes it, according to the rules, level 3 operation. Again, the Luzon, Mindanao, Malaya, the resource location up here, Palembang, other locations you see there are going to be my objectives. I also have to pay the headquarters cost, which for the Japanese South headquarters is 4. Try to show this. 4. That's what that number represents, command points. Were the combat units that I activated be activated for a longer period of time, it would also increase the headquarters cost, so you can quickly spend yourself out of having points. I spent the vast majority of mine, giving me only a few for next month, or the second operation of this month. Okay, at this point, because I'm playing solitaire by special solitaire rule, we're going to not roll the operational intelligence at this time. The solitaire rules state that during contact movement, when the operational player is detected by the reaction player, at that point the operational intelligence condition is determined. So that's what I did. But as I said earlier, I decided to make it surprise attack anyway to make it more historically accurate. Okay, I assume that if you're interested in this, you probably look through the scenario rules for this. There's going to be quite a few things moving, and I'm going to try to coordinate, as I wrote in the text up here, to where everything closes and approaches their objectives at about the same time. I don't want some jackrabbit task force to move quickly, get too close to the allies, get detected before the other stuff has had time to get where it needs to be as well. So it can get very confusing when you have a lot of moving submarines and task forces. So just bear with me as I go through this. So I didn't, according to the, I didn't pre-plot all of my moves in strict accordance to the solitaire rules because, and I may do that later on when there are the special scenario rules that limit the ability of the allies to search and all that. When those aren't in effect and I have to be much more careful about my moves, I will do that. But I did designate destinations, objective areas for each of the task forces, and so they will move in accordance with that. And I will make take special care to stay out of the 2 hex search range that the allies are limited to here by special rule at the start. And what I will do is show in the moving on the operational display, which I will just bring in here on the side real quick, what happens with movement and advancing the day track as well. Okay, so you saw right there that I had task forces. I'm getting ahead of myself. I had a task force here, task force 11, move 1 hex. So what you do as soon as something moves in the contact phase, you move the naval track marker 1 hex, or 1 space. It just happens to be a tinted spot, so that causes you to advance the day. And I go back and I correct this later. I actually advance the op begin marker, but it should be the day marker. You advance at 1 space into the 1. And you continue doing that as you're moving. 2, and then eventually the days will count down. What I'm trying to do is start with my task force that has to move the farthest, and then slowly bring in the other task forces, so by the time I reach a location where the allies can start searching for me, I have everything at sea and everything the same distance away, hopefully 2 hexes to 3 hexes, where they're very close to their objective landing areas. So I'm keeping the operational display off map area, but I'm continuing to advance the move marker and then the day marker. the southernmost, by map orientation, the southernmost area is Task Force 2 down here. So I'm going to click through these moves, and I put movement track on so I could watch their moves, which did cause me to get confused after I had many things going at one time. What I found to eventually be the best practice was to move everything one hex and then hit the clear, which is this MOV button right here, which clears this. So then you start again. So you're making sure stuff doesn't move too much or you skip something. Submarines can't be searched for by air, so there's no problem getting them closer to where the Allies have search ability, because it's only going to be the task forces that can be searched for. Okay, so I just moved it into the 7 space. That's the 7th move, and that is 3 tinted spaces, so that advances the day marker to the 3 space. So now the task forces that have a longer route to go have been at sea a while. The ones that are very close or start close to their objectives can put to sea. I wonder why task forces down here are not moving. They should be moving by now. Okay. And I'll briefly bring up the composition of my task forces. Pardon me, fumbling around here. See, over here is Task Force 3. It's a cruiser, a destroyer, and a light cruiser, and has a Marine battalion. And it's actually going to come over here and land at this very resource-rich spot. It's one of the richest on the map, Palembang. This has become a standard turn 1 move, is to take this area here, because if you don't, the Allies then have the ability to try to demolish this hex, and if he demolishes it, it actually takes a long time and is quite expensive for the Japanese to get those resource points back. They have to spend command points to repair that demolished action. It's not a big deal in this game necessarily, campaign scenario, since you don't have to worry about generating command points through the normal method that's used in the strategic game, but I decided to play this as closely as possible as I would to a real situation where I would be playing for the entirety of the war. Down here, task forces 8 and 9 are 2 destroyers, 1 each, that are going to land in the Philippines. 4 and 7 are, 4 is a land combat, or is a surface combat task force. 7 has a division and a brigade. 8 is another battalion. Over here I'll be landing a regiment onto Mindanao, and there's an aircraft carrier, a light carrier, and some surface combat there. These forces here are 2 divisions and a force of battleships, which are coming over to the Malaya area to land on this hex here, which is has a Allied installation, which I'd like to take, and it gives me a road here into Malaya to get down to Singapore. I've chosen to move naval units first, obviously, rather than land units. I have some units here, as well as it's going to go down through Bangkok, down into Malaya. Okay, let's get back to this. So now confused myself with those movement tracks and whatnot. So now every increment I am resetting the moves back to 0. And that helps me track who has moved and who hasn't in that increment. We are now up to the 9th increment. Oh, I noticed here that Task Force 1 had blundered within 2 hexes of this airbase, and sure enough, the Allies has air there, so now they have the opportunity to search and potentially halt all Japanese movement with a successful detection. So the Allies rolled a 3. Because they're searching for a naval unit, and there is squall in this area, which is, you see on the map, it's the Southeast Asia zone. It is in squall, so a +2 modifier to the search roll turns a 3 into a 5. Cross-referencing that on the Allied search. The unit that searched was a 2-engine air at 2 hexes. A 4 or less would be a successful result. They scored a 5. Search is unsuccessful. So the Japanese get to keep moving. Be careful making those mistakes. I didn't plan to do that. Kind of glad the Allies didn't succeed. I have to be more careful. There are places where the Allies have forces, but they do not have air. So as I move these guys in, there's no air unit here. There's no air unit at this base. So I just know there was no air unit in Force 14. So the Japanese were able to sail by without being subject to any searches. I say there that I still have some task forces to move, but I'm holding them back to allow the units that have a little bit further left to go to make up that distance. There's no air unit that the Allies have in Force 24. And this is the point here where these task forces have now moved within range of Clark Field, or this area here, 3920 in the Philippines. And I think by rule the Allies could have stopped and tried to search at this point before the other task forces the Japanese had moved there. But they did search. A 1-engine unit from 3920 searched the hex 4120. Right here, there were 2 task forces in there, so that actually gave the Allies a beneficial die roll modifier for having 2 task forces, and they rolled a 0 and scored a detect. So at this point, the Japanese have been found, and the Allies are going to stop the Japanese contact movement. The level of the detection, that's an excellent roll. They get a green result, so the Japanese player would be forced to give good information to the Allies about the contents of those 2 task forces. No other searches are possible. And it's at this point that the operational condition is rolled for by the Allies secretly on their display and then revealed. And this is it happens here by a special solitaire rule. It would have already been rolled for if you were playing this face-to-face with another player. The Allied rolled a 0. So you'll consult this chart here. I know the Ally has a reaction strategic intel level of 3. His roll, which you can't see on this because it's secret, but by bringing up his display, he rolled a 5. So cross-referencing Intel Level 3, strategic Intel Level 3, with a 5, we see that it's intercept. So he would take the intercept marker from his secret display and place it here, revealed. Okay, I was just talking about the Allies rolling the operational intelligence condition and it coming out intercept, having forgotten that I'd already decided by homemade and special scenario rule we were going to start a surprise attack for the Japanese. So it is in fact going to be surprise attack. So we will continue now with the reaction player activations. And let me bring up the Allied force chart. Where is it? Okay, so according to the rules, and these are at the back of the rules, and I'll give you, as I look here off my desk, the paper rules. Rules section, page 53, left side, section 1. So we annotate that in the game parlance as 53L1. Talks about the size of operation that the reaction player is able to run, and it depends solely on the level of operation that the operational player is running and the reaction player's operation and the operational intelligence condition. So in this case, surprise attack on a level 3 operation, the Allies are only able to run a level 1 operation. And one of the things of this game is while the advantage player or the operational player can bid for the length of operation that he wants, the reaction player does not do things that way. They are only allowed to activate units for 14 days. But they do have the option of continuously buying new time as long as there are activated operational side units that haven't been deactivated. So anyway, a level 1 operation allows the Allied player to activate up to 20 activation points of combat units. That does not include the headquarters cost, but it is 14 days for combat units, up to 20 activation points. However, if they go above 10 activation points, they also have to pay the headquarters cost for the Southwest Pacific, which is 4 points. Now, I'm sure it's possible I made a mistake here. Let me click through this. I only wound up activating, I believe it was 10 points, because I wanted to, my rationale is that under surprise attack, they're not going to get a contact move, a reaction contact move anyway. So having something that can move right now, they're not going to have the ability to intercept up here before the task forces get to Malaya. They're not going to have a chance to, I think, interdict anything before it lands. So I decided to not burn through the majority of the points, activating 20 units and paying that cost, and basically wiping out the Allies for any chance of having a worthy bid in the second operation of the month. Maybe if they preserve some points, they might have enough to actually, it's unlikely, but they could win the bid for the second operation of the month. And then by preserving them, I'm allowing myself some flexibility as the Allied player in this case, some flexibility to have points available to respond to crises here and there as they come up. So again, I'm only activating 10 points, and I'll bring this in and I'll show you how that works. Here I made a note about the Allies being able to activate up to a level 2 operation, and that was in error because I'm thinking that the condition is intercept. Then I noticed that I've decided to go with surprise attack, and so that allows a smaller operation for the Allies. So the Allies activate the 5 submarines in Force 16, and that is Manila. Even earlier in the war, and it is somewhat ahistorical, I believe, the Allies are allowed to, or Allied submarines are as effective as they were at the end of the war. So this is about the best weapon that the American or Allied player has at this point to cause the Japanese some loss. So they were activated. That's 5 points. 1 point for each of the 5 submarines. Submarines are a good bargain too, because 1 point buys an entire month's worth of time. They don't operate on weeks. So they get placed on the map. Next I flipped the Northern Luzon Corps. It was a 3-point unit. So it gets flipped over. You'll see that in a second as it gets activated. There it goes. The counters are identical, except the activation cost is not on one side and it is on the other. So that's 8 points activated. And the reason I activated that one is if I can save it, if it doesn't get pinned by the Japanese, I mean if they fail in their initial attack, I might be able to pull it back into a better defensible position. Though by special scenario rule, I'm now remembering Manila is a clear hex. Here in the game, it's this color here, which we see is mixed, which is very defensible terrain. But by scenario rule, Manila is actually a clear hex. So, but I want to be able to move that Northern Luzon Corps rather than just have it die in place by not having it activated. So that's 8 points. And then I activated 2 air units, one in Manila and one in Clarkfield, which is this hex right next to Manila. That's actually the unit that did the searching that found the Japanese task forces. Those are 1 engine level 0 units. They have an 8 range. You see their air combat, their naval combat, and their ground combat units. At level 0, they're not very effective units, but it's better than nothing. And they search just as effectively as higher status level units. Okay, so those are the activations for the Allies. The reaction player contact phase is skipped because of the surprise attack. Okay, so now we're basically done with the strategic sequence track. I'm going to close that out. And now we're going to be going through the battle cycles, and we use the Daymark, the battle cycle tracker here, and I've showed that previously. It's just that tinted spot on the phase tracks. And you start with the lighting phase, and that is found here on the operation display. Now, because the Japanese have the advantage, and because it's special or it's surprise attack, they have the option of placing the marker in the hex or in the space of their choice on the first lighting phase of the battle cycle. If they choose not to use that and just roll the die for a random placement, at some point later in the operation they preserve that option. They don't get to place it wherever they want, but they get to advance it 2 spaces instead of 1. But I went ahead in this to place it where I wanted it. I placed it in day AM. And my rationale is that that's going to give the Japanese the ability to get probably 2 turns worth of airstrikes in to break Allied formations, specifically the Northern Luzon Corps, the Koto Baru defending unit, and wherever else, also in Palembang. Potentially break those units with air attack prior to my engaging in land combat, which makes my land combat much easier. Planes can only attack during day turns and dusk if you want a little bit riskier in dusk turns, but I wanted to give the Japanese enough daylight in order to conduct those raids. Okay, normally each side would roll a die, and depending on the intelligence condition for the operation, apply a modifier, but the Japanese are automatically, because of the surprise attack, they are automatically the advantage for the first turn. And we go back to a movement phase. It's not contact movement, but it is advantage movement. So submarines can move 1 hex per advantage or reactionary movement, and task forces can move up to 2. Planes do not move in this phase, and land combat units can move up to their movement allowance as well. So I'm going to move subs, or I'm sorry, naval and subs first, and bringing my task forces the last couple hexes. I think I neglected it here, but the non-moving side, in this case the Allies, would be able to conduct searches as well. I probably am not going to search as much as normal gameplay would be, because I happen to know, just playing both sides, what's in each task force, but of course they need to be detected in order to be attacked, so there are some searches in here, once in a while. Oh, I see there's a search there. So 4020 here, or right here in Manila. Oh yeah, it's searching here, 4020 from Clark Field there. Gets a 4. I believe I made a mistake and I corrected. That is not a successful result, because in squall conditions that would be a miss. And see there, yeah, with the +2 modifier, those are not detections. Okay, in these two hexes there are Allied small airfields, and those installations can conduct searches in their own hexes, so they are going to do that. And the one in 3219, I'm in the wrong spot, it's right here, 3219, detects this task force here. And I won't bring it over and show you, but I will. That is Task Force 6. It has an amphibious assault unit with a couple land combat units in it. It has a heavy cruiser unit and a light cruiser unit. Okay, so another search there. It was not successful. And the second move, okay, that sub only moved 1. That's correct. So those hexes where these units moved into will be searched by the installations. So these two task forces were found. There's a surface combat task force that has battleships and cruisers in it, as well as a transport task force with amphibious assault ships in it. Okay, now that naval moves are over, I'm going to be moving the land combat units, and they will be disembarking from their ships to their objective hexes, as well as the ones that are stationed on land will be moving. And the way that's done is force markers are placed on those hexes. So you take the, come over here. You take the land combat unit off of the task force display where it's with the ship that's carrying it, and you place it back on the force marker, or the force chart. And then the number of that force is then placed on the map in its new location. And that's what you see there. Force 22 just showed up in Palembang. Force 17. That one hasn't come yet, but it will in a sec. And because this is an amphibious assault, those land units that I landed have to attack. They can't just sit in the hex and deactivate. Not that I would do that anyway, but they are forced to attack, and their troop quality is halved. Any remaining fractions rounded up for the first combat only to lower their effectiveness. I'm still, these clicks are just me rearranging or placing the forces on the map and getting the land units onto the force chart. Okay, now the Guards force, the Guards division, which is Force 2 here in French Indochina, is going to move overland, overrunning the port of Bangkok. And the overrun of Bangkok also has the effect, which I want to show, which if it doesn't happen immediately, it will happen shortly in this file, in the video. It moves the strategic initiative track one space to the right in favor of the Japanese. This over here is in favor of the Allies, this is in favor of the Japanese. This is the starting initial marker placement is here at the start of the game. And there are many important advantages to having the strategic initiative in your favor. Taking Bangkok is one such move for the Japanese. Each time you take one of these red locations, the resource locations, is another move for the Japanese. The Allies could move it in their direction many different ways, taking Japanese ports, Japanese airfields, destroying Japanese resource hexes. There's a lot going on in this game. I keep harping on how wonderful it is. There's a lot of intermeshing of processes within the game that just make it completely fascinating to me. Okay, so it started, it moved 6, which is basically 2 points per hex, and they're 2 because it's on a road. That's relatively fast movement for a land combat unit. If this road wasn't here, these jungle hexes would slow it down. It will continue in future turns down the peninsula towards Singapore. One of the house rules that probably the major change to the Marcus Stumpner house rules is that each land unit can only move once per week. So it's just moved for the week of up until day 7. So after day 7 starts week number 2 up to day 14. So it'll basically get 2 moves in this operation, if it's a 2-week operation, that is. Which I think I already said it was. Okay, there was a land unit in one of these in the headquarters hex 21, and it moves out. Okay, at this point, because there was no defending land unit, places that I landed, I'm converting their installations into Japanese installations. So just replacing the markers. Okay, so that concluded advantage movement. Now we get to the air mission phase. Air units don't move in the same phase as naval and land units. They have their own unique phase, the air mission phase, and here they can rebase, they can attack and return to the same base they came from, or a different base within range. Various air missions can be undertaken, but it's important not to wait until you get to the correct phase to do your air movements. There's a strike marker that's used in the game, and I just put it down here in Mindanao. I'm going to be attacking this ground unit, this allied ground unit in Force 9, which I will bring it up and show you. Force 9 is this corps, or this division right here, the Mindanao division. It is not activated. I'll be striking it with a carrier-based air unit from Task Force 5. Hoping to break it, so when this land combat unit that landed moves in, and the combat there will be much easier for it. Okay, so the air unit overflew the enemy force. The enemy force gets a chance to detect it. It does not detect it. Its anti-ground strength is only a 1, not very spectacular at all, and rolls a 5 and misses. The Allies still get to shoot flak, anti-aircraft fire, back at the air unit. It does it after the attack because it was not detected ahead of time. and they score a 1. So the Japanese lose 1 step of planes, which equates to 15 actual planes. So these units have a little starburst on them. There are 3 on it right now, because the carrier is only able to carry 3 steps. A full-strength air unit has 6 steps. So there only has 3 steps, and you'll see an additional starburst show up right there, which then lowered the combat strengths of the air unit to reflect the loss of planes. So not very good for the Japanese to start off. Given the low odds of the ground strength of that plane, I probably shouldn't have even bothered. Next strike will be here on the land unit in this hex 3920, again to try to break that land unit prior to ground combat. The Japanese have quite a bit of land-based air available to do that. Before going into the objective hex, and there's 3 air units in this combat, 2 1-engine units and a 2-engine unit, they're going to try to coordinate prior to rolling into the objective hex. And what coordination does is allow any interception or air combat to be a little bit more favorable to the attacker. But they do not make their coordination roll, so they go in uncoordinated. Oh, all these lines are just, I got confused of which base they came from, because the 1-engine units don't have the range to go all the way back, so they have to rebase here. So that's why I was doing this. I was seeing which units had come from where, but that goes away in a second. There you go. Allies do detect. So the Allied unit that was at the airbase cannot be destroyed on the ground because it was activated, and it now gets to engage in air-to-air combat. So each side designates a unit that will conduct the air-to-air combat. The Japanese will use one of the 1-engine level 2 units. It has an air-to-air strength of 7, plus it gets additional modifiers of +2 for the 6 additional steps of level 2 there, making it a strength of 9 unit. They roll a 7 and score a hit on the Allied unit. The Allied has a strength of 4, but it has to subtract 2 from its strength for the fact that it's attacking a unit with 2 status level steps higher than it. And it misses. The hit is adjudicated and it's put on there. The strength reduces, and I make the decision, since the only thing left in this hex is the North Luzon core, and I don't want to damage the airfield. I'm just going to attack that land unit trying to break it. This is showing what their ground combat strengths are, and this is against a ground unit, 6, 6, and 5. Miss, a miss, and finally hit it. So a 5, if you look at the combat chart, something with a strength of 5 that rolls a 2, you follow the color that you reach down to the appropriate row, strike combat, air unit versus ground unit, a T, that means the unit has to take a troop quality check. And again, it's the North Luzon Corps has a troop quality of 4. Has to roll a die, rolls a 9 and breaks. So on the card you would put a broken marker on that LCU unit. So these units fly back, and again the 1-engine units land at the air bases there in the Philippines, while the 2-engine unit flies back to its home base. Okay, we're going to try here now at 4209 to break the land unit there prior to that ground combat. I flew one unit in. It is detected. Flak scores a hit. Probably should have scrounged up additional air units to do this strike, because the plane unit misses and flies back. I wanted to try to hit the capital ships. The reason I didn't add additional planes to the previous attack is there are capital ships sitting there in Singapore, and I wanted to take a shot at those. So I did manage to coordinate the strike there, so 3 units are going into Singapore coordinated. They are not detected, everything looks good. So the two two-engine units will attack one each on the capital ships. That's the Prince of Wales and the Repulse, I believe. And the one-engine unit will strafe the airfield because the Allies have planes sitting on the tarmac. The first unit scores hits, gets a 1 hit on the Prince of Wales. The second unit scores a 4. A 2-engine, even with a strength of 5, 2-engine rolling a 4 is a miss on a ship. But the 1-engine unit scores 3 hits on the grounded air unit using strafe combat, which is a very good result, nearly eliminating the unit. And now they have to undergo the flak strength of 9. And the Allies assign that hit to this 2-engine level 2. That air combat is over, so those units, this one didn't have the legs to get back to where it came from, so it lands on this newly captured airfield here. The final strike will be on Palembang. And that will be an airborne drop using a 2-engine unit here, flying to Palembang and landing at this airfield that I captured. And that's why that was done. That was captured to be able to have a landing point for the plane to get those that airborne brigade over there. The Allies detect the flak as 1. They score a miss. Airborne troops land, and then they will take part in land combat along with the Marine Battalion that was landed earlier. And there will be some bombardment combat too to try to break that unit prior to combat. There is no naval combat, and we get to that bombardment. Okay, first we're going to start down here. And this is in, I believe it's 3920. And bombardment strength is this number up here in the upper right corner, a 2, a 4, and a 2. And those are, again, targeting the North Luzon Corps. What's important to note is as soon as you score a hit in bombardment, you stop. The other ones don't get to roll, because you can't cause more than 1 troop quality check. So even though that they were targeting there, they are assumed to have fired, but we don't actually need to roll because they've already achieved the result we were looking for. The unit is broken, so its troop quality is halved to 2. It rolls a 4 and breaks. Because it was already broken, having lost or failed its check, it loses a step. So a hit marker is placed underneath it. Next we'll be bombarding in 4209, which is here. I have 2 battleships, each with a 4, a cruiser with a 4, and another ship with 2. Again, we're doing the defending land combat unit. The first ship scores a hit. The rest of them don't need to fire. But the British units at Koto Baru, it's actually an Indian division, passes its check. And I forgot this one here, but I'll get back to it in a second. I'll realize that I should have rolled that one. Now we're into ground combat. First we're doing down here, 3920. You can see that I have this troop quality 7 division, this troop quality 5 brigade, and this Marine battalion. I'll be using the troop quality of the division to go ahead and spearhead the attack, and it's important that you know which of your land combat units you are using to spearhead, because its troop quality is used to determine the combat results to an extent, but it also has to be the unit that takes the first 3 losses, because that's another of the house rules, but it takes the majority of the losses that might be suffered. Because it is an amphibious assault, their troop quality is halved, so rounded up it is a 4. The defending unit is halved because they're broken, so they're 2. The combat is conducted in clear terrain here, so there are no column shifts on the land combat chart, which I'll bring up. You cross-reference the attacking troop quality 4 with the defending troop quality 2, you get column 14. I rolled a 9, a disastrous result. There would be column shifts for terrain, but clear terrain doesn't have a column shift. Gets me to, there were 17 or more steps of land combat units involved, so that gets me to 2 steps attacker lost, 2 steps defender lost. But because it's in the white here, there is no mandatory retreat called for. So I added those 2 steps to each unit. The defending Luzon Corps took 2 steps, and then the 48th Division, that's troop quality 7 division rather, took 2 steps lost. Now we'll do Koto Baru up here. A 7 division and a troop quality 6 division against this Indian division. Again, yes, I'm halved for amphibious assault. So a 4 attacking a 3 gives you column 11. Terrain is again clear, so there's no shifts for that. But I do significantly outnumber the allies in numbers of steps. So 24 steps attacking 7, according to die roll modifications down here, gives me a -1 to my die roll. Roll a 5 on column 11. For the number of steps, we each lose 3. Pretty much bloody, but indecisive at this point. Oh, did I do that wrong? I rolled a 5, which becomes a 4. That's why, yeah. 2 to 3. I lose 2. They lose 3. Weird stuff happens occasionally on this computer. So hit markers are placed. that one initially said 3. I wonder if I decremented it down to 2. No, I'll have to change that. It actually still says 3. Next we have the airdrop and the amphibious assault here. I realized at this point that I didn't bombard the defenders, so I'll do that now. Roll to 0. Got it on the first roll. And one of the house rules in the packet I'm using says that earlier in the war the Dutch defending units should have a slightly lower troop quality than what's printed on the counter, so we go with 2 instead of 3. They fail their roll, so they are broken. So should have good odds for this combat. So 4 for being halved, attacking a 1 gives you column 16, but this terrain is jungle, so there is a 2 column shift down to column 14. I'm deciding to put the paratroops in the lead. They will take any losses. Roll a 4. We only have limited number of steps. So it is no attacker losses, 1 defending step lost. And the defender only had 1 step, or 2 steps. The defender has to retreat because he's already broken. But according to the rules, if a broken unit is forced to retreat, it takes an additional step loss, which eliminates the second step of the unit. So it doesn't retreat, it's just eliminated. And then I can go ahead and convert that installation, and then that is an additional, I'll do it a little bit later, but it moves the strategic initiative 1 more space to the right in the Japanese favor, because that is a resource location. I do it right there. I mentioned that you get 1 for Bangkok also. So it is now the Allied disadvantage turn. They don't have a lot that they can do. They were only able to activate 10 points worth of units, but they do have the subs, they have some air units, so let's see. In here I'm just talking about that. Already talked about my reasoning a little bit. The Japanese were able to get fairly close to their objective locations. So Allies weren't, again under surprise attack, the Allies weren't going to be able to intercept them effectively. So preserved points to see if having them on hand were able to get something later on during one of the later activation phases, where use those points for something that would be more beneficial. They do have an activated land unit here, the Luzon Corps, but it isn't an enemy occupied hex. So even though it was the hex that started it, and it's still controlled by the Allies, there's an enemy unit in there. It's engaged in combat. It cannot be moved. So the subs can move. So here I move 3 subs into that hex where there are 2 Japanese task forces. And then I move the other subs out into where they can do some good later in the month. Okay, so you get to roll. If you roll less than the number of sub steps in the hex, you'll get that many attacks. So I roll a 4. As long as there's at least 4 Japanese naval units in the hex, which there are, I'll get 4 attacks. So the Japanese player places his ships on the map, and then the Allied player assigns individual attacks, only 1 per unit, but up to that number that he rolled, which is 4. So he's going to attack each amphibious ship, the heavy cruiser, and then the destroyer. I chose the destroyer because Japanese destroyers have powerful torpedo armaments, and so causing damage to them, though in this case the cruiser has one as well, the light cruiser, but damage would reduce those torpedo strengths. That's why I choose them as targets. One of the other special rules for submarine combat that I'm using in the house rules is that units with anti-submarine warfare capability, in this case the Destroyer 10, can try to roll against that strength to screen an attack. If he rolls 2 or less, he will be able to nullify one of the attacks that has already been determined. And it would probably be one of them against the amphibious ships, maybe. We'll see. Though in this case, in this short campaign scenario, he might probably rather screen against a combat unit. But he rolls an 8, so he is not able to screen. So now the allies will roll for those attacks. The first one was attacking one of the amphibious units and gets a hit. That is a miss. That is a miss. And that is a hit. That is against the destroyer. That's a possible critical hit too. If you look at the combat chart, anytime that you have combat against a naval unit and you roll a 0, it has to be against a naval unit, you have the ability to roll the die again to see on a 6 through 9 additional hits are scored. So let me go back and show with a strength of 2, a 0 under torpedo combat gives you 2 hits. So that destroyer unit has already taken 2 hits. So you roll the die again, get a 6, 1 additional hit. So it suffered 3 hits, which is half of its hit capacity. These small destroyer units represent 6 total ships, so that's 3 destroyers sunk. In the original rules for the game, every hit reduces a combat strength by 1 point. So 2 hits would have totally wiped out the air-to-air power of this destroyer, taking it down to 0, which is still usable, but it's very weak. Under the house rules, strengths are reduced proportionately. So half of the destroyers are gone, half of the strength is now gone. So the combat strengths for this unit are now halved. So the short range firepower is a 1, the torpedo strength is a 3, so on and so forth. And I make a note of that here. Right there. Okay. They do still get to conduct anti-submarine warfare. Their strength is now a 1 for being damaged, and they do score a hit. So 1 hit will be placed against the one of those allied submarine units. And allied combat there is over, and is now their air mission phase. They have 2 air units. I've forgotten about the one initially here in Manila, so what happens is I attack the one in Clark Field 3920. Will attack the Japanese land combat troop quality 7 division in its own hex. But I catch my mistake, and in a minute I bring the other 1 engine unit in from Manila, and it joins in. The Japanese try to detect, and they do not detect. The attacking air unit strength is 1, rolls a 7, which is a miss. Japanese shoot flak, and they also miss. Now that air unit didn't want to stay in that hex, which is probably going to get captured, so it flew back and rebased in Manila. And here's where I catch the other unit. It should have joined in the attack, because there's really nothing else for it to do. It can attack here. I mean, it could, but those are very powerful Japanese air units, and it probably would immolate itself there and be destroyed, so it didn't try that. So it just joined in with its buddy on that land combat. And it also hits, or it does hit the Japanese unit and causes it to undergo a troop quality check, which, wait for it, the Japanese division fails. So this is the lead division in this attack here in northern Luzon. Potentially a bad move for the Japanese. But they do also have a Marine battalion in there, a 1-step troop quality 7 unit, which in the next opportunity to conduct land combat, it might take the lead. Which also means it would probably be destroyed because it has to take the loss as well. It only has 1 step. but the Japanese division breaks, and the anemic American Air Force in the Philippines has a shining day of glory. No other Allied moves. And here's where we get to an interesting phase in Pacific War. You get to do additional activations. You have points remaining on your card, and both sides do. This is a joint phase. Both sides can do activations, or they could choose to deactivate it at this point. That makes no sense to deactivate early, so my stuff will stay activated. But this is when, at the end of an operation, you would deactivate your units to prevent going into penalty time and having to pay additional points. And this is the point where the Malaya headquarters does have some points available and decides it's time to activate their ships. So they have a battleship, a battlecruiser, a destroyer, and they activate two engine units for a total of, I think it's 9 points. So Task Force 2, you see now, is on the board. It's been formed. That is the British ships in Singapore. Okay, in the deactivation phase, all stuff that has been active, or that has, I said deactivation, in the detection removal phase, everything that has been detected in the game that is not in a hex with an enemy unit can flip back to undetected. Units like Task Force 11 and 10, which are in an enemy occupied hex, have to remain detected. But this unit here flipped back to undetected. Here is where you advance the day marker, and I actually screw this up, but then I fix it. We're on day 4 because we moved through 1, 2, 3, 4 tinted spaces. In day 4 you would advance it 2 spaces, because in the battle cycles every day adjustment phase adjusts the day marker 2 spaces, not 1. So this would move it to space 6. But you can see I accidentally moved the lighting, but thinking it was a lighting phase, I rolled the random lighting condition. So 3 through 9 moves it to day PM. And then I realized I didn't move the day marker correctly, so I move it to day 6. The next phase is we roll dice again to see who is going to be the advantage player for the next battle cycle. Under operational intelligence conditions, surprise attack, the Japanese get a +2 to their dice roll, so they'll be hard to beat, and they also get the benefit of any ties. They roll a 5 modified to 7, the Allies roll a 3, so the Japanese during the next battle cycle will be the operational advantage player. So this is the end. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will come back and continue this game. It's been pretty long. It's probably about an hour and a half at this point. Don't want to bore everybody to death. But I will go ahead and play forward from this point to see how second and third battle cycles shape up, to see if the Japanese are able to rebound a little bit here and continue to push towards Manila, isolate Singapore, and then consolidate in Sumatra. Thank you, and we will see you next time. One thing I forgot to do earlier was to place an offensive support base marker for the Japanese in the Kotobaru hex. These are available during the engineering phase for 10 command points that have to be spent out of one of the headquarters that you gave command points to, or one OSB offensive support base is available per operation to be placed in a shoreline hex that you amphibiously assault. And I've decided to place it here. My rationale for that is I want to maintain command links to all of my units, and from the headquarters I'm able to trace water command links to all of the shore locations that I'm going to be concerned with. But once I get inland in Malaya, this OSB here acts as a transfer point for command points, which are ostensibly are logistics, supplies, ammunition, beans, bullets, all that kind of stuff, and the planning that goes into operations. It has a range that allows it to reach inland, so I can actually progress from the shore where the headquarters would be able to provide supply to the inland areas. There's no place in the Philippines which is really out of reach of sea supply in a command link, so I use this here. These can be attacked. These could be vital nodes to target. If you can knock out an enemy's OSB, you can put their units out of supply, which becomes a problem for both sides in mainland China and the fighting here in Burma and India. So yeah, I forgot that earlier, so I wanted to make sure I catch that now before continuing into the next battle cycle.